can I also ask you to go deeper into the cyber piece? So General Raj Shukla mentioned the cyber piece.
Yeah.
Both in the context of China and otherwise.
Yeah.
I've had several conversations with, as I've told you on my podcast, with people on the intersection of tech and future of war. And one of the pieces that's clearly come out where India seems to be lagging, and I think you are the best person I can ask this, is what are those gaps in the cyber piece? One is the institutional pieces that General Shukla mentioned, maybe a formal cyber command, not just a coordinator. But what are those pieces that India is lagging on? And why? And how would you recommend India starts to fix that?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. It's a great question. I wanted to elaborate on it, but okay. So now I'll give a response to that. You see, unlike EW, which is manpower intensive, in addition to being a specialized domain in terms of training, the expertise, there is moderate level of expertise, but a heavy amount of sophisticated equipment and availability of that much of manpower to operate those systems. That's what is EW characterized as. Cyber, on the other hand, does not require a huge amount of manpower, but requires a top level of specialization. So the HR part in cyber, the expertise development. So numbers are definitely required. So let me talk of numbers first, just to put things in perspective. I'll not talk of our own numbers because of certain aspects. But let's say the US, it raised its cyber command with about 6,000 plus personnel in the year 2010, and thereafter it has grown to some extent. China, the strategic support force, which has now been, of course, bifurcated into the aerospace force and the cyberspace force, etc. But the estimated strength of the strategic support force, which had EW, cyber, cognitive, and space, was estimated to somewhere between 1.5 to 2 lakh personnel. That was the strength of the estimate. That is the estimated strength of the erstwhile strategic support force. And that's only at the strategic level. In addition, they have resources within the formations on all these aspects too.
And of course, they have a massive number, from what I'm told, massive number of groups operating outside of
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. That is only within the PLA. So there are a whole lot of militia, cyber militias and all also working. And they have the Ministry of State Security, etc., which is also working on cyber aspects. So I think the FBI director who just relinquished, let's say less than a year back, he said that if we put I'm talking the US now, if you put all our cyber resources together and compare it with the Chinese, his estimate of Chinese cyber resources, there's a ratio differential of 50:1 is the figure which he came out with just very recently, just a couple of months back, vis-a-vis China.
50:1.
And now we know what the US is and we know what we have. So I say scale, sophistication, and expertise. These are the three aspects which we have to focus on. So scale is also required in cyber, though not to the extent, numbers I'm saying, not to the extent in EW, but increase in scale. But much more important is how do you train them? How do you get this expertise? So the HR part. So we have to have our own captive. Firstly, I am a firm believer that the main cyber force that we have has to be captive. You can't be outsourcing. Firstly, it has to be, okay, so let me bring out a separate issue here, which in passing, General Shukla also mentioned, that brings cyber out of the closet. Talk about it openly. Offensive cyber. I'm not talking of the defensive cyber. Defensive cyber, within the armed forces, we are...
Just mention that resilience is what we've been focusing on.
We are in a good place as far as defensive cyber within the armed forces. I'm not talking of the country. I'm talking of the armed forces. We are in a good place. But offensive cyber is what we have to focus on. And so far, we had been keeping it under wraps from security point of view. Now, the point which I want to make here is that carrying out offensive cyber operations is perfectly acceptable and justified as part of a justified war. If you can throw missiles, today, for example, over the last 3 days, if we can shoot missiles into Pakistan, why can't we carry out offensive cyber effects? So it's perfectly justified. What is the question mark is when you carry out covert cyber operations in a gray zone environment. That is when you have to keep it covered, and to what end are you doing it? So my view is that armed forces have to focus on offensive cyber operations as part of a justified war in a multi-domain operation context. That is the cyber capability that we have to develop. And so we need not be shy or covert or, you know, not talking about it at all. Because unless we talk about it and bring it in the open, it will never happen. So that's one point.
Because
And
offense
then,
is also part of your deterrence.
not just deterrence. Why do we call it? I mean, the word deterrence itself is. So I'm saying when we are in a war, it's no longer deterrence. You're actually carrying out offensive action. Just like with kinetic, it's a cyber offensive which you're carrying out. It's
Yeah.
perfectly justified against military targets. So if it's a critical infrastructure which is supporting the adversary's military effort, you can always carry out cyber operations, and there's no international law which is stopping you from doing that. So the next part is how to develop this cyber expertise. Now that's a different kettle of fish altogether. And that is where specialization, and this specialization is a key, is not only true for cyber, it's equally true for, I mentioned this critical mass of expertise which we require. We require it primarily in two or three domains. One is AI, one is cyber. I won't put EW in this category because the type of training we have on EW we can handle with the current way of going about things with certain improvements. But cyber, and the third is all of this ICT, software development. When I say ICT, it's all the other software related things of which AI is a super specialized aspect. So these are areas, our IS systems, information systems as we call it. These three verticals have to become extremely super specialized, and our HR policies have to be completely transformed. The real transformation is required in the HR policies. Unless we transform our HR policies, institutions empowerment, one is of course like General Shukla mentioned, allowing them to you know absorb expertise from outside. But the other is whatever expertise is captive to us, they have to be trained and they have to be specialized. So the specialization aspect, we have to throw all our sector profile. A lot of policies we have which is generalist oriented, not specialist oriented. This is one area. At the same time, having said that, while the main cyber expertise, since your question was on cyber, since the main cyber expertise I am saying should be captive, but there is a role of other agencies also. There are certain types of actions, there are certain types of expertise which is available in the civilian domain, which also we need to exploit for various purposes. So it's a mix. So the entire HR gambit of the cyber part is a very complex affair. We have not really given it proper. Let me put it this way: that much more thought needs to be given to which is this system which is likely to work the most. So certain amount of increment, certain amount means significant amount of increment of the numbers per se, but much more importantly, how do you train? Just getting the numbers is not going to make any difference at all. It is the expertise, how you develop it. That's where we need to focus, and that's what China has been doing for many years, both in terms of numbers as well as in how they go about it. I mean, I remember going into this aspect several years back, and they were having 5-year offensive cyber courses being run for how they train the cyber warriors. I mean, that's the type of focus which was there. So, and that's why, I mean, now they're making their presence felt, which you see in all these critical infrastructures, which all these reports which are coming out from the US, that they're already embedded, they estimate they're already embedded in all the critical infrastructures. And it will be very prudent for us to assume that our critical infrastructures have all been ingressed already. That is the assumption which we should make, and at a critical point in time. Why do we make this assumption? We have to make this assumption because of the type of resource which has been which has been put in by our adversary, and so we have to function on similar lines.